Um, we're really like if Houston is reimagining themselves, if we were reimagining themselves, Doug Houseladen is reimagining Century City or whatever one of those big suburbs downtown was reimagining. We have to think about reimagining everything around New York City. And way less so Boston. If Anna was here, I would have told her that's not a real city. But so we have to think in terms of that we're really the suburbs of New York City, and we're trying to find a better way to connect the suburbs. For many years, we had none of that connectivity. So it wasn't technology, it was service. And it was governance in Connecticut and the history of governance in Connecticut, which really left us with a lot of one-town, four-town transit systems, not a lot of regional transit systems. Hartford, New Haven, and Waterbury are probably the exceptions where you really have an integrated system that covers a large tributary area feeding into one central downtown. But there are a lot of what I call mom-and-pop transit districts that really had their own system going from the early days and never really changed out of that. The Coastal Link was one of the big connectivity changes that we made to try and create a more convenient one-seat ride and more convenient avoiding transfers. When we started Coastal Link, the Milford-Stratford line, I think we had 4 people a day transferring between the Milford bus and the Bridgeport bus. And they probably had a long wait because the schedules weren't coordinated. It was just dumb luck that these people would transfer. I believe the first day the Coastal Link ran, we had something like 140 people riding across that town line, which meant there was this latent demand there that we had never met effectively. And a lot of that was because of the governance, and that if you start thinking at a higher level, you click up one level and say, there's regional trips, we need to think more regionally. That's part of what the connectivity is about, it's part of what our service planning is about, it's part of what our service delivery is about, but it's also going to play into the technology as we go through into this. We at Condot and our transit operating arm, CT Transit, have definitely entered the 20th century. We have a website. Unlike Doug's, we don't have quite the number of mobile hits, but we're working on redesigning our website so it's mobile friendly. All the things Doug went through with Facebook and Twitter and all the outreach and flyers on the buses and public meetings and one-to-ones, all of those things, every sound transit operator was doing those things. So that's nothing that innovative. What's innovative is as the technology was evolving. And one of the unfortunate things with us, if Doug H., they're both Doug H's, never mind. Doug to my right, as opposed to Doug to my far right, says, well, why don't we have AVL in New Haven? If our system had been even older, we would have put an AVL system in 5 or 10 years ago, which means that by today it would have been outmoded, outdated, totally old technology. The coincidence of what you buy today new is going to be old in 15 years, and you now need to buy it new in year 16. We're at that point now, we're taking that step over the line, and all of our systems have been old. They were purchased new and state-of-the-art at the time. What's state-of-the-art last week is not state-of-the-art this week anymore. What's state-of-the-art 20 years ago is certainly not state-of-the-art today. So we're looking at evolving all of this technology as we adapt it. Doug H. to my right commented why New Haven's not first. Well, one of the reasons why we picked Bridgeport for our automatic vehicle locate system was because you don't bite off this gigantic chunk of the whole state at one time. We have 600 buses, 450 paratransit vans in the state, not to mention the railroad. If you tried to design the system and implement it in all of those 1,050 vehicles with rubber tires that we've got, you'd never get it done. It would be an impossible job. So we picked Bridgeport as a demo site, as a prototype site to see what could be done, what could be installed, what the problems were that we had before we took the great leap and did a whole statewide system. Based on the experience we had at Greater Bridgeport, we designed our system now to take advantage of the errors that they learned, the benefits that they got out of it. But you also needed a radio system to run any of the AVL, or at least you used to. Now you could probably use your smartphone, but 5 years ago you needed a radio system to run a vehicle locate system. We got a new radio system in statewide. It's built on the state police radio spine, so we have very reliable service and very comprehensive statewide coverage. But without that, you couldn't have done any of the AVL. Now we can move on to the AVL and look at what we can do. We're starting it with CT Fast Track because, again, it's a manageable size, and we're trying to sell that as a high-tech solution. The rest of the system is coming along within 12 months, so it's not like you're waiting forever. This is just, we had to phase the installation. You're not going to take all 600 buses off the street on day day one until they all have their AVL installed. Got to do this in phases. So we've phased the project. Fast Track is first, and this is not necessarily part of the Fast Track purchase. There's a statewide purchase, of which, with some of these elements, Fast Track is just the first phase. So we'll be looking at the AVL and what that can do for us. We're looking at a farebox system also. We have what now is an ancient farebox system. It's 20 years old, and we're replacing that. In fact, we will have the newest fareboxes in place by February to start testing them for Fast Track. And then even the next generation of fareboxes are ready by the time we start installing them in the rest of the CT transit system. So again, we're at that cusp of technology of, we could have bought a system 6 months ago, had an old system. We're now buying a system today and 3 months from now, and it'll be a brand new state-of-the-art system. With state-of-the-art problems, probably at startup, like anything would have, but you deal with that. As far as the customer information, once you have AVL, you now have a whole panoply, and Annie used that too, right? So, we have a whole panoply of services that we can provide once you've got your AVL data. Doug had talked about it really well with what his system does. We will be doing the same thing, accessible by mobile phone, accessible by computer. We will have variable message signs at our CT Fast Track stations. We'll decide at some point at what point we really start putting those variable message signs up, say in downtown New Haven. But that'll tell you the next bus or the next 3 buses arriving. That's the kind of information that you get to the stop. You have the security of knowing that you didn't just miss the bus, or you did just miss the bus. You have to wait for the next one. You know that the bus is coming in a couple of minutes. You have that ability. The satisfaction level is because now you have that comfort zone of knowing when the bus is coming. And if it's going to be a few minutes late, at least you know that, you're prepared for that. We're looking at mobile apps for vehicle locate, so we already send text messages out for disruptions in service, detours, things like that. This is the next generation of that type of central office to many recipients type of mail that we can send out. We have trip planners on our website now. The front page, we have our Trapeze, which is the software system. We also have Google Maps trip planner. All of our CT transit data is in GTFS, which is Transit Feed System, and I forget what G means, but I always thought Google, but it didn't. But it's hard to get that stuff into that format, so Google Maps can use it. So when we get Fast Track updated into the GFTS system, it will be an open system. Anybody can use it. We're going to have our own hackathon, by the way, for mobile apps, following New Haven's lead on that. Fares with the new fare system. Again, we have to phase into that in a manageable way. We're putting new fare boxes on all the buses in the state over the next 12 months. We are, for the moment, going to retain our magnetic stripe card because we thought it was a really large leap to do the whole state with a new fare system and totally new fare collection methods. But we are looking at smart cards. I was in Seattle over the weekend, so I have my Orca card, which is an RFID card. It's tap on, tap off. I'm going to Washington tomorrow morning. I've got my Smart Trip card. This is not rocket science, but it is logistics that has to be implemented very carefully in each system. So we're not reinventing wheels here, but we have to get our own wheels, and it does take time to do it, and especially when you want to look at a complicated system. Integrating with the rail system is a whole other issue. I think that's the no I gave you, or the maybe. Because we don't drive that train. Metro-North and the MTA in New York drives that, and the weak point in that whole cross-ticketing has always been on the train itself. Can you get something that you can use at a bus fare box, or you can use at a Metro card or next-gen machine down in New York, but that'll also be read and honored on the train, and that's always been the difficulty in that. So we're working on that with the railroad, and we may get to an open payment system sooner than we think, where you tap on your MasterCard, or else your employer or your university puts an RFID into our card. Actually, I should hold up the Orca. My son goes to University of Washington. They have a chip in their student ID card that as long as you pay your $76 every quarter, or as long as your father pays it, you get free transportation on King County Metro and Sound Transit and all the transit systems up in the greater Seattle area. They activate that RFID. If you don't pay your fee, they deactivate it. It's not honored at the machines. That's really where a lot of this is going. And we're designing and implementing a system that'll be prepared to do all of that stuff. Anna mentioned a lot of the features of Fast Track. I won't go over those again, but one of the things with Wi-Fi on the Fast Track buses, we're going to try that out, see how it works. It has a cost involved in it. What's the trade-off with customer satisfaction? We'll assess that as we go through and see if we want to expand it. Our express buses, we're putting USB charging ports on them. So if you have an Apple and it always runs out of juice by about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and you want to text them that you're coming home, plug it in, you'll get enough juice at least to send your text home to start putting dinner up or whatever. The last piece I want to talk about is partnerships and T-Hub. This is all about partnerships. It's come up a couple of times today. Ann talked about it, Anna talked about it, Doug talked about it. Anything we accomplish is through partnerships. If you want to talk about new services we've done, we added night service in Waterbury maybe 3 years ago in a partnership with Naugatuck Valley Community College. They charged student fees. The student fees went towards us giving them a U-Pass, which is our ticket that we give to students at colleges. And that U-Pass for the $20 or $25 semester fee gives you free transit on any of the Waterbury system. Actually, I guess it gives you free transit on any of the whole CT transit system, but it's largely Waterbury. The night service has been a big success, but if we hadn't been getting 20% of the cost of running that service from Naugatuck Valley Community College, we might not have gone down that path. We're not loaded with money. If you don't tell anybody, we actually have probably increased our service about 20% in the last 10 years in the last 15 years between job access and one of Governor Earl's service initiatives. But in a current services budget, we've managed to increase service fairly significantly compared to where some of our peers are around the country. But a lot of that is now being done through partnerships. The partnership in New Haven with Gateway and Alexion, that's a great type of partnership to enter into. So we need to keep seeking out those new partnerships. UConn Health Center is getting a lot more service as part of CT Fast Track's expansion. That's an opportunity. Capital Community College at one end of Fast Track already does a U-Pass. CCSU just started it this year. So we start building those partnerships. That's a way to get more fannies in the seats. It's a way to get more partners and more money on the table and help us pay some of these things, which none of them make any money. So we need the subsidies. It's a way to get the users to pay a little more of the subsidy. Last, I want to talk about T-Hub, which is probably the greatest, it's the largest technology lift that we'll be doing in this state for a little while. It's a partnership with the University of Connecticut. T-Hub is a transit hub. It's where all of the transit information in the state will eventually be posted and stored and utilized. They have, I think, 72 terabytes of data that they can store. That's a lot. It's bigger than a gigabyte, I think. So they already store, for example, all the census information by census tract. So when we're doing analysis by census tract for federal requirements, we can use that data. It's in one place. Every region doesn't necessarily need to go out and develop their own database. Some do. Some of the good councils of governments can handle it themselves. Some of the less capable councils maybe can't. You've got T-Hub as a data source for them. All the transit data will get dumped there. So it's regular ridership statistics, things like the automated passenger counters that Doug talked about. We'll have those also. That creates a truckload of data every day. You're not going to print it out and store it in a file cabinet. You have to figure out ways to use it, though. So it's received, stored, and then come up with programs for how to use all of this ridership data. Can it be tied into through GPS to what stop they got on? Well, yeah, it can. What are you going to do with it? If you find a use for it, it's a really great service planning tool. So the better data you have, the better planning you can do, the better service you can run. And then you can get into the better technologies. So I think I'll probably leave it at that and give you 1 minute for questions.
We have no time for questions. We have arrived at the witching hour. Want to respect our time. Just to recap very briefly on this fascinating panel, we started out with the prospects of route redesign. I think the Houston model is one of the exciting ones around the country. A lot of us are keeping an eye on that. The implementation and whether we can hear the screaming from here. As you note, they have not got there yet. So this is a major system redesign, and there's already been pushback if you follow the Houston newspapers. But it's a very interesting model because the main thing about that is no new money goes into the system for these major improvements, but there's a lot of other changes. So that's the first thing in terms of what route redesign opportunities are from Houston. The second for us, which we haven't talked a lot about, is the opportunities coming out of CT Fast Track. and that is straightening out some of the kinks in our road structure as we put CT Fast Track in place in the next year or so, which is an important one. And the third takeaway point, I think, is the important role of technology. As Michael Sanders mentioned, we're at the cusp of a major change in a variety of things. I mean, AVL, when I was in Europe not long ago, the GPS AVL system for the bus literally was on the smartphone. They had a $150 booster on the top of the bus rather than the $5,000 Soviet-era radio systems we had in the past. It was a $200 system on the top of the bus. So if you wait long enough, this stuff gets cheap. So we have AVL coming, which is huge, and then remarketing the information on that so you know where to go to. And then I guess the final point is the whole issue of harmonizing the whole system, because I think you mentioned the rail fare box. There's a new app called Route Scout, which basically says you can start from here, and if you want to go to look at the tree in Rockefeller Center, it will talk by mode, by time to get you there. But it's dependent on all the systems being integrated. At some point we'll have a payment system that fits that, but at least integrating the route so you're not sort of having to pull your hair out. And again, if I got $1 for every time around the country I saw some poor person looking at 9-point type on a 12 by 18 sheet route schedule, you know, I'd be a wealthy man and retired out of some warm place. So that last point about harmonizing across routes, across modes, is going to be very critical over the long haul. So technology gives us huge opportunities. And again, this is a great set of panelists we've had today. Christoph Spieler and our three here. So let's thank our panelists.
I would like to also thank you all for coming and thank this panel, the first panel. Our keynote speaker has been wonderful. We've heard so much today. We have heard firsthand how jobs and transportation go hand in hand. We've heard that investment in transportation not only creates jobs, but you need transit and transportation to get people to their jobs and to give an employers a larger labor pool from which to choose. As Connecticut looks to improve its economy and increase its workforce, transportation is a critical piece to the overall puzzle. So now the work begins for all of us. We need to get out there and make certain that funding is maintained for the Job Access Program. We need funding to improve and increase our transit system to help make it easier, more convenient, more attractive for people to use, so we can help them find out what's going on, find out how they can get from point A to point B. And we need to communicate our thoughts, our concerns to elected officials, policymakers. And with the legislative session beginning in less than a month, let's keep up the momentum. Thank you all for coming, and we hope to see you again soon. Thanks.